so I've already primed these guys to talk a little bit more in depth and about things, and no one here is going to tell anybody else what they say, so they can be honest, if that's not too hard. So I'm going to start with Brad Mosen first. So we've got Brad here. Brad, age is 34 years old. Okay. I've had a brief here. Looks every bit of it. And he started racing Kiwi kids. Did that for 4 years, and then went on to TQ racing for 2 years and midgets for 17 years. So just talk us through why and how you got started in Speedway. Why was it Speedway?
I'm one of 15 people in our family to have raced something, third generation Speedway, so I was kind of born into it. My uncle Gary Davey, he was quite a well-known racer, pretty successful in his day. He raced with Hugh Graham. He raced midgets, TQs and sprint cars. Granddad Don Davey, he's a legend, everyone knows him. So I was sort of born into it, and just as a kid I was always at the track watching Gary, and by the time I was sort of 8 or 10, we were sort of looking at the quarter midgets and bugging Dad to try and get us into it, and then once we got in there, the rest was history.
Yeah, the transition from quarter midget racing to TQ racing, and then TQ midget racing to midget car racing, probably which was the biggest step, do you think?
The biggest step for me personally was they were both big steps, in both two different ways. Like the TQ quarter midget to the TQ, quarter midget we had was terrible, and the TQ we had was really fast. And all of a sudden I was 15 years old, and we had a really good car, and I didn't really have any sort of success to my name. So there was a lot of guys in the club that weren't too happy about it. So there was a lot of pressure to sort of behave and figure out this adult world. And I had the dispensation, so I was only 15, and it was all quite a big deal for me at the time to wrap my head around racing with all these adults who don't like me, and had to start off the back, and then we ended up being fast, and then the rivalries that came with that. And then moving into the midget, I remember this car we bought, there was something about it, I don't know what it was, but it just felt so fast. And I remember the first time I drove it, I came into the pits, it was a practice, and there weren't no cars around, and I said to Dad, I said, I don't even know how to drive this thing, let alone if there's cars around, like, I'm going to crash because it's too fast. So they were both pretty big steps in different ways, but I'd say that probably the step to the midget was the one that was probably took me the longest to wrap my head around.
Okay, and coming into the midget class as such, you obviously had been watching it for years and years and years. Did you try and model yourself on any particular driver? Did you try and think, he's the kind of guy that I'd like to end up being like?
I know you're fishing for a compliment.
No, no, not all. Not unless you wanted a fast trip to the referee's box all the time.
No, I mean, being a Speedway kid growing up, of course I had my heroes like yourself, Shane Alec. Can't really think of it, like there was Carl Warboys at the time, Kevin Hyde. Like there was all of these guys, like even my uncle. So basically all of the guys that came before me, I'm a real like Speedway nerd, and just being a part of that world, like everyone that came before me, even like Justin Inslee, they were all the big inspirations. So I didn't really model myself off an individual, but just as to like what midget racing was in New Zealand, that was exactly what I wanted to be. So
yeah. Okay, now you've had some different car owners. Obviously your family started your racing, but it really got quite complicated for you as a driver when your dad then became the promoter. So I can tell you, like, just the chatter around the place that you were getting favoured this and things like that, and probably sounds a bit like your TQ section, but how did you deal with that? You obviously had the pressure of being the fast kid in the TQs and the new kid off the block, but then you had this other pressure once your dad became the promoter and you were getting what appeared to be sort of favourable treatment. How did you deal with that?
For me personally, I dealt with it fine because I knew it was just like conspiracy, like sort of just people talking, and I could see where they come from, but the reality is it was actually harder on me. And the thing that I struggled with was seeing people say that about Dad, who's like, he's super, like, he really focused on trying to make it so transparent. No matter what he did, it was, no one could really see it for what it was. So I felt bad for him, and that sort of frustrated me, but in terms of people saying things about me, that's one thing that never really affected me. for whatever reason. I mean, I've sort of had a lot of it in my time, but none of it's really stuck. So it was just the stuff towards Dad that sort of got to me. And that's more of a sticking up for him thing rather than having anything to do with what they were saying.
Sure, and I've alluded to the fact that you've had a few car owners in your day. We'll start with Reg. That's your nickname for your dad, and he was quite the character trying to learn how to get speedway cars to go pretty fast without too much knowledge. You then drove for Bill Buckley, and then that didn't go quite as well as probably what you expected. Would that be right?
No, it went really well for the most part. The last season, for whatever reason, was pretty average, which is why I ended up leaving, which I think was probably mutual because of that.
Yeah.
But no, it was a really good stint with Bill. He's obviously the man in New Zealand for midget racing. He's got a lot of resources there, so with the race shop and all the staff there. And he took me to America, so really grateful for Bill and everything that he did for me.
Yeah. When you looked at the achievement list of Brad, it's really, you know, all three of these guys, it's outstanding, to be honest. You know, you sort of think, oh yeah, he's done pretty well, he's done this and he's done that, but truly, it's gobsmacking. New Zealand Speedway Sportsman of the Year, New Zealand Speedway Competitor of the Year in the midget car section. You also did some racing in America. You had 2 years of racing professionally for Keith Kunz in the US. Now, not everyone here will know of Keith Kunz, but in my day the guy to race for was a guy called Steve Lewis. But out of the Keith Kunz garage, it's like trying to drive with Lewis Hamilton in Formula One or be coached by Graham Henry. Keith Kunz is the guy, and guys that have come out of his stable that have had a lot of success, it's Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, who have raced here in New Zealand. Tell us about your time. How did you end up there? And tell us about what it was like.
So we got tied up with Keith through a mutual friend, which was Corey Cruiseman. He came down and raced in New Zealand. I was racing in the TQ section, and somehow I wound up talking the guys into letting me crew for him in Australia, and we ended up buying his car. So we became quite close with Corey. He'd come around and have dinner and stuff, and we sort of started talking about going to America. And he was like, "Oh, I can try and introduce you to Keith and Pete and see if we can strike up some sort of a deal, you know." And obviously it meant bringing some money and raising quite a lot of money. So we just put our heads together and we went and met with a couple of people around town who are pretty savvy with that sort of stuff, and got in touch with Keith and Pete. And I'll never forget the day Dad called me at work and he was like, "You're going to race for Keith in America?" And I was like, "What?" I couldn't believe it. And so anyway, I ended up going over there. I was only 18, so I moved to America. Dad came over for the first month, and then I was on my own in America in this strange country. Yeah, like I said, at 18 years old, but I was in the world that I'd like spent my whole life like just obsessed with, like watching all the Thursday Night Thunder, and like we didn't have YouTube back then, or we did, but it didn't really cover any racing. But you know, anything I could find, like Open Wheel magazine, Sprint Car Midget, like I was obsessed with it. And all of a sudden, I was at like Terre Haute and Eldora, Knoxville, racing like with Keith, and I was going to crew for them on their sprint cars at Winchester, and just all of this stuff. I could not believe it. And yeah, it was an awesome 6 months. Came back here to race in New Zealand, and then went back for the following year. And yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then in 2015, you won the New Zealand midget car title. Tell us a little bit about that. I think that was in the car, the Corey Cruiseman car, wasn't it?
No, that was with Bill in the Mobile 1 car.
Okay.
So that was probably the best car I've ever driven that season. From mid-season, we got this new engine. I don't know what there was. There was something about this car, and it was just so fast. And we just got on a roll with it, and we ended up winning the New Zealand title with it. And we ended up winning 11 races in a row with it. So that was a real highlight of my career, that sort of section, and something I really look back on fondly.
Now we're also all pretty familiar with the Chili Bowl, which happens in our middle of our season, and it's a big race, indoor race in the United States in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You actually made the A main at the Chili Bowl, but you did it in something that was quite unique. You drove for some guys that had a Synergy V8 engine, and the car was controversial because it had a V8 engine as opposed to everyone else had 4-cylinder engines. Tell us a little bit about that tenure with those guys, and what got you to the Chili Bowl?
It was just a wild idea that Luke and Simon had. I mean, I'm sure most people here have seen the documentary that they ended up having made. It's on YouTube. So I don't know, it's just something about where I was at in the midget racing world in New Zealand. They chose me to come and drive this car, and we quickly threw a car together and took it up there, and it was awesome. Kiwi built car and a Kiwi built motor, fully Kiwi team, as you can see in the documentary, and something we're really proud of, and something that I'll be proud of forever, I guess.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, there was a time, maybe, might have been perhaps 3 seasons ago, might have been 2 seasons ago, I'm not sure, but there was an announcement by the Seamount team that you were going to be their lead driver as such, with Brayton Davison and a few other guys, Taylor Clark, a few other guys in their team. And honestly, on paper, that looked like an unbeatable force, given that, but it didn't go that well. Can you sort of tell us why?
I think it was being year one. I don't know what, there's something about, we were just still in the learning stage, I would say. We definitely figured out towards the end of the year, maybe I put a bit too much pressure on myself that year. I think it was probably the best I'd ever, like I remember that year I never qualified outside the front 2 rows bar one night, and we led a lot of races, but we only won 4. We had a heap of DNFs, and I think on paper it wasn't a very good year, and there were some pretty average parts of the year, like Parramatta and stuff like that, but for the most part it was okay. But I think just putting it down to just being year one, we're just still figuring each other out, and figuring the setup out. We still had some stuff that we were genuinely learning the car for the most part of the season.
From an outsider's perspective, it was certainly a new team with all new personnel and things like that, so it didn't look like it gelled, and it just like disintegrated as such.
Yep. And
then I suppose you thought, well, that's the end of my speedway racing. There was no more rides for you. Your time looked like it had lapsed, and then you got a lifeline as such. Tell us about that, how that came about. And I'm talking about with Wayne Green, and the fact that you've virtually almost a candidate for the most improved driver of the year. And how does that happen with someone with such talent that's been a New Zealand champion and all that, and now all of a sudden you popped out of the abyss as such?
I don't know, there's something about getting sacked that really lights a fire. Unfortunately, I spent pretty much 2 seasons off, and then the chances I did get back in the car, I'm not going to lie, I was emailing Brett all the time, like, oh, let's make it work, like, I'm going to get this money and we'll do this and that, and he just wasn't keen. And I think I actually called Wayne when he first sacked me, and I was like, do you need a driver? And he said, nah, not yet. And I was like, oh, okay. So I called everyone, and ended up sitting in the stands for pretty much 2 seasons, which was terrible. Like, my life was over and all that kind of stuff. But then out of the blue one day, Wayne called me on a Friday afternoon. I was driving home from work, and he was like, sort of beating around the bush, and I was like, oh, where's this going? And he goes, oh, if you want to come in to the shop tonight, I've got a car there, if we put it together, we can go racing tomorrow if you want. And I was like, tomorrow, okay. I've been retired for 2 years, I didn't even know where my gear was or anything, so I ended up working with Wayne until like 1 or 2 in the morning, and then all of the next day, and we finally got this car together. And yeah, like I say, huge fire lit within me. Like, straight away I was running, like I'm probably approaching now the fittest I've ever been, and it's all because of the opportunity that Wayne gave me. And we just had so much fun last year, and the results are really good, so I'm probably the most excited I've been about racing in a decade.
No, that's really fantastic. Just anything in general, if you've got a question for any of the guys, please go ahead.
I'll kick off. Brad, when you're on a championship night, right, what's your mindset like in terms of, you've got a goal you want to achieve, obviously being the 1NZ, that's the pinnacle. What is your mindset in that space? Is it any different to, say, a standard night?
Yeah, for the most part, it's pretty much different every year. Depends how the year's going. I'd say this year I was probably the most relaxed I've been since we won it. more relaxed I am, the better I go. But obviously, being relaxed comes with confidence and knowing that you have the car or the ability or you're in a position to win. So
I think too, when I go back to doing what I do and I see the times and everything, and I look at how the cars are going, and I see you on that qualifying night of this year, last year, and it was just you were the favourite. You were the one that was, you were going great guns. So obviously it changed to the next weekend, which changed the picture. But yeah, I mean, what does that do to your mind space?
I mean, that night speaks for itself. I mean, that sort of just shows like where me and Wayne got the team to, or where Wayne's team was, and I sort of fit into it perfectly. We're having a really good time. There was no pressure at all. The car was really fast, and the way the car was, it's exactly the sort of car that I suit, and I just felt really comfortable in it. And we went out for that final heat, that last title night, and we've been similar to Michael and Hayden and everyone lap time wise all night. And then the last one we went out with Michael, and he was on the front row with me, and I was like, okay, now's going to be when we sort of see how we go. And I've never been a lap time guy, but I went and looked, and we were like quite a bit quicker, and that was the first time I realised that we actually had the car to win. So that really relaxed me. And then of course we got rained out, and then things changed, and then I stuffed up the feature the second time around. But that's just racing. I just made a funny mistake. I went up. We had a yellow flag late in the race, and during the big long green flag run, I could hear my tyre, and I felt like I was like hammering it pretty hard. So on the yellow flag, they prepped the track, and it was all wet and sloppy up the top. So I ran up in that water to try and cool the tyre down, and I think what I ended up doing was sealing the tyre over, which I've never ever done that before. I don't know why I tried it that night, but it ended up slowing the car up big time, and then I just panicked and spun the car out and just stuffed it up. But it goes to show you, it's all mindset. It's one little thing. Like 2 laps later, I was jumping out of a hole, spinning the car out, trying to chase down Hayden, who was vanishing. So just be comfortable is key, and depends how the season's going as to how I feel on the night.
Do you guys think about that when you race? Do you get how much of your mind does it consume through a season?
It's funny how far out of the season you can be when still everything you do through the week for some reason ends up being done before Speedway. Like the way you eat, like the way you live your life, like even sleep, and who you're friends with, and like what you're doing on the weekend, like what you're watching on YouTube, or what you do with your spare time when you're on the simulator or training for racing. Every single thing in my life ultimately is for Speedway somehow in my mind. So it's completely consumed me. I'm an absolute super fan. I have been since I was a kid. I've been going to Speedway since I was 4 months old, and I'm completely obsessed, and I probably always will be.
You've got 2 brothers, Brad. You've got, but they don't seem to have any interest in Speedway at all.
No, we're all very different, completely different brothers here, but all sort of the same, just in different avenues of life.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to mix it up a little bit here. I'm going to ask Wayne Green to come up just for a sec. I know this is a bit random and it's probably a little bit off the script, but Wayne, you're probably the first car owner we've had here that we can put under the thumb as such. Can you tell us, when you obviously chose Brad and you've chosen Zach Dahm and stuff, but what do you look for to choose somebody to drive your race cars? What's the criteria? Is it a thing, or do you watch them? Do you just give us a bit of an insight into that? What it's like to be a car owner?
Yeah,
and you've raced before, which makes it a bit harder.
I'm like these guys. I sort of, I wake up and I live and breathe it no different than the drivers. Unfortunately, I've got a business to run as well, but bulk of my time is spent, thinking and organising speedway events. But as far as to answer your question, looking for a driver, in my stable, it's someone that wants to be, like Brad, really passionate about it, involved in the sport. Same as Zach in the workshop. He's like Jonathan. When he's down here for the summer, he's in the workshop seven days a week. It's not a turn up with your handbag and go racing deal. And, it's not what everyone thinks. It's not. We're not a big budget team. We throw good resources at it, and give Brad the best tools we can to go racing. But Yeah, probably commitment and a really good attitude. You know, is a big thing. And you know, I knew Brad reasonably well because we've raced together for years. But that Friday night when I rang him up, and you know, like he turned up down the workshop at 6:30 or 7 o'clock that night. We had a chassis sitting there with a motor in it basically, and you know, I think we arrived at the track at 5 to 5. The next night and went racing, but and I've enjoyed this season.
Just down a little bit, just
Sorry, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this season. You know, better than even when I was racing myself. It's great, just you know, Brad's commitment. I think, you know, I ask him every week how far have you run. I think he's run over 100k since Christmas. So, you know, he's just full 700. Sorry, you know, so I thought it's getting close to 1,000 actually. But you know, yeah, like he's just so committed to it, focused, and you know, and doing a good job. And yeah, I was going to sort of chirp up before when you know Brad said, you know, when you asked him what happens, you know, when he explained when you do bad and spin out, you know, and near on winning the New Zealand title. For those of you that don't know, he turned up the next week and his car was on the shelf all pulled apart, and we put him in a science project for the rest of the year. So I don't have to keep on buying science projects, but. No, we're just having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and how gratifying is it for you to realise that you've made the right choice, and that you're actually reaching your potential as well. I'm sure, you know, the happier you are, the better life goes on. I'm sure.
Yes, I think so, and sort of, you know, probably, you know, like I am the crew chief, but you know. These guys sitting beside me have probably, you know, forgotten more than I know. We wing it a lot, but we tend to get it right, or he does a reasonable job of you know, with the trolley I put him in anyway. But yeah, it's just been a fun year. My wife over here, Robin, you know, she's enjoyed it more than ever because she clips with Brad, and you know, it's just like a family deal really. You know, we all get on, you know, sort of sit down, have a beer, but if you know. After the race, we've sort of won, we've you know, ran last, or put the thing in the trailer on the jack. It doesn't matter.
I know you guys were scheduled to race at Darwin, and with the COVID thing, I think I was speaking with Wayne. I think that's done an about face, but there was going to be. We spoke to somebody and they closed the entries at 100 sprint cars and 40 midgets for a big meeting in Darwin. Was it going to be the end of August or end of September? End of August, yeah. So where's your preparation now? You're obviously ready to go to Darwin racing, but where's your thing? Will you keep running until the season starts, or have you got some other ideas you want to do?
We don't really know yet. We're still sort of in the it's a very recent sort of situation that we've come across. You know, the cars have been sent to, it was the second car we built, the CP3 car, and we ran at the end of the year, so we've sent that over to Brisbane with the plan of going to Darwin, like you say. So we don't really know with this 8-week ban, we definitely can't make that race. So whether we leave the car there or bring it back, I'm not too sure what Wayne's plans are. We're sort of talking about maybe leaving it there and seeing what races we can do, but obviously it depends
at Archerfield in Brisbane,
wherever we can go.
Possibility, yeah, okay, because their season starts quite a bit in advance of ours, doesn't it?
Yeah, they start on the 2nd of October. So.
Okay.
We don't really know. We'll just have to talk about it and figure out what the situation is. You know, we've got an engine in that car and things like my seat and steering wheel and like, you know, stuff that we need. So I'm not too sure. We just need to sit down and figure it out. But
steering wheel's a little bit handy, yeah.
But yeah, there's nothing will get in our way. We'll come opening night, we'll be there and we'll be ready to go. So
and as hard as it is to do, just tell us someone that was significant in your development as a race car driver. I know there's, you know.
I've got so many, yeah. I was thinking about that one, and I really can't pin it down to one.
Okay.
I'd say probably the first one was my uncle. He was my hero growing up.
Yeah.
And then from then on.
That was Gary Davey?
Gary Davey, yeah. And then from then on, I'd say the only way I could really sort of wrap it up briefly would be just the sport as a whole. It's just something about the sport that I'm just so obsessed with, and I just can find inspiration from everything, even things like Pete winning that New Zealand title and running his own team, and Jonathan, and just everyone here tonight. There's a lot of familiar faces, and just the passion that people have for Speedway, and my family that are behind me, they're all just as passionate about it as I am, and you know, we've gone deep. You know, Dad's been running the place, and you know, we've been there for for decades, and we will be forever. And yeah, that, like I say, everywhere I look, there's something that motivates me, and just the sport as a whole is what keeps me going.
It's a really good answer. Yeah, that sport. I mean, no one's bigger than the sport, are they? So just your best race.
I can speak for him when he won that race. I could hear him. I was on the infield with the crashed car, and I could hear him from so far away just squealing inside the helmet. I laughed for so long about it. He was just squealing like it was a big moment. It was real cool. But yeah, for me, when I think of a bad race, it's probably the ones that were going good that I stuffed up. So the ones that weigh on my mind. I can think of a lot. Mostly like New Zealand titles, like when you sort of get into like a race with Michael, when you think you got it, and then you stuff something up, and then he gets you, and you think like, oh, I could have done. Like I could have done this. You know, it's easy to say now, but they weigh on your mind, and you know, it all means a lot to me. So I think about them all the time. But your good race was my best race was the 50 lap that I won back in 2009, purely because I was driving for Dad, and you know, I was only 18, and we were sort of new to the midget world, and all of a sudden we'd just won the 50 lapper, and family team, like all family friends on the car, and I parked up the car in front of where all the family sits, and they're up there chanting, and stood up on top of the car, man. It was so cool. Yeah. It's the coolest moment of my whole life, like literally. So, yeah.
Thanks, guys, and thanks again, everybody, for coming along with us.